Hey guys, it's Courtney. Today we are going to be talking about the disappearance of Jaliek Rainwalker. This is a sort of a local case to me, and even though it happened several years ago, it's one of those that you hear about and you never really stop wondering what happened to him. So for today's card or coloring, I'm going to be using the Definition of Friendship stamp set by MFT. I'm going to be using my Copic markers, and I will list all of the supplies, or the very few supplies that I used, in the description box below. So let's talk about Jaliek. Jaliek disappeared on November 1st of 2007. He was 12 years old, and at the time he was living in Greenwich, New York, which is a little bit outside of Albany, so upstate New York. A little bit of background on him. Jaliek grew up pretty much in the foster care system. When he was born, he was actually born addicted to cocaine. So as most of you know, this can cause a lot of issues throughout somebody's entire life when they're born addicted to drugs like that. They have emotional issues and behavioral issues, mental issues, you name it, it can happen if you are born addicted to drugs. So he kind of bounced around from foster family to foster family before going to live with Stephen Kerr, Jocelyn McDonald, and their 4 children. They had 3 biological children and 1 adopted child in 2002. 2 years later, the family did decide to adopt Jaliek, so he officially became part of the family. So Jaliek had a lot of behavioral issues. Like I said before, he had a lot of emotional issues. He got frustrated really easily, and he had a hard time forming relationships, which is not uncommon for anybody in the foster care system, but especially someone with the background that Jaliek had. Now, this is a really big family. There was 5 kids and 2 adults living in a very tiny house. This house was more like a cabin. It only had 2 rooms. All 7 family members slept in the same room. They had no running water. They had no bathroom inside the house. They had an outhouse. And they only had limited electricity. So I'm not sure how all that works, but they only had electricity for a couple of hours a day. So somebody like Jaliek really struggled with this. He didn't have his own privacy. He didn't have his own space. So when he felt that frustration coming, or he had an outburst, he really didn't have any escape. There was only 2 rooms, and most of the time all of the family members were all in the same room together. The kids on top of that were also homeschooled. So he really didn't get a break from home at all. So he was having a lot of outbursts, and they became more frequent. And he was having issues with the other kids being homeschooled as well. Now, he wasn't getting any kind of medical care or any kind of medication or therapy or anything for the issues that he had. So not saying that that would have changed the outcome, but it probably wouldn't have hurt the situation for him to get the help that he needed. So after a while of all of this going on, the parents, Stephen and Jocelyn, finally decided to reach out for some help. They claimed that Jaliek had become suicidal and homicidal and kind of had violent tendencies. So they finally reached out for some help. They actually wanted to put him back in foster care, but they were told that that was not an option. So instead, what was recommended is that Jaliek go to stay with other families here and there for a couple of days or for a week at a time, to give Jaliek a little bit of a break and to give the family a little bit of a break from one another, and see how Jaliek did with that. So prior to his disappearance, Jaliek actually stayed with a foster family that he had stayed with prior to staying with Stephen and Jocelyn. And apparently he did really well. He was very happy. And the following week, he had planned on staying with a different family. So he stayed with them for 1 week, and the second family was going to be week number 2. But there was one day in between where he was to be going back with Stephen, Jocelyn, and the other kids. So instead of going back to the family home, Jocelyn and Stephen decided that it'd probably be best that Stephen stay with Jaliek that one single night. Now, Stephen's father was out of town at the time, so Stephen and Jaliek stayed at Stephen's father's house that night. So it was just the two of them. Stephen said they had a pretty good night. They did have a little bit of a talk about Jaliek's behavior and how he should apologize to the rest of the family and to the kids for his behavior in the past. They went out to dinner at Red Robin, and then Stephen said that they went to bed pretty early. Stephen said he woke up around 7:30 in the morning to find that Jaliek was missing. Jaliek was gone, as well as his bag of clothes and his belongings. They were also missing. Instead of immediately contacting somebody, not necessarily the police, but somebody for assistance in finding Jaliek, he ran errands, went home, took a shower, and then finally called the police to report Jaliek missing. Now, like I said, he woke up at 7:30 and found Jaliek was gone. He didn't report Jaliek missing to the police until just before 9. So it was about an hour and a half that nobody knew that this kid was missing. So the police pretty much immediately started investigating the disappearance. I think maybe they were skeptical of it being Jaliek running away, which is what Stephen claimed. Stephen believed that either Jaliek ran away on his own just to get away, or he ran away to end his own life, because they had found a note that was confirmed to be Jaliek's handwriting. And it said, quote, "Dear everybody, I'm sorry for everything. I won't be a bother anymore. Goodbye, Jaliek." So because it said goodbye, they believed this was truly a goodbye note. So the police started investigating, and they found Jaliek's belongings, the bag of his clothes and his belongings that Stephen said he must have taken with him, in the garage of the family home. So at this point, his belongings were still there. The only thing that was still missing was Jaliek himself. Jocelyn took a polygraph test, passed it fine. However, Stephen refused to take a polygraph, and when asked, he then retained an attorney. And at that time, I remember watching this on local news, and Stephen was all over the news, giving interviews and, talking about Jaliek and what happened and how, they were trying to find him and all of that. And then it just stopped. So as soon as he had the attorney, he stopped giving interviews to the news and to the newspapers, and obviously stopped speaking to police. So police continued to investigate this and found that Stephen's cell phone was pinging in the middle of the night when he said both him and Jaliek were sleeping, in an area away from where his father lived. So they brought up some surveillance videos from that area where his cell phone was pinging, and did see a vehicle of the same make and model as Stephen's vehicle. They weren't able to confirm that it was definitely his. They weren't able to read a plate number from the surveillance videos, but they were able to confirm that a very similar vehicle was in that area at the same time. Now, where this area is a little bit concerning, because it's right where you can get to the Hudson River, which a lot of you may be familiar with. The Hudson River is huge, and it goes through a majority of New York State. And sadly, it is what they consider a dumping ground for victims, homicide victims. A lot of people do choose to end their life that way. And so a lot of victims have been found in the river. So that was a bit concerning, why his vehicle was there in the middle of the night when he claimed that he was home sleeping, and so was Jaliek. Now, while this investigation was going on, the family packed their belongings and moved to Vermont. Now, as far as I know, last time I knew, the family still owned the home, but they no longer live in it. They live in a completely different state, which is also odd to me, because if the family believes that Jaliek may have run away and he is still out there, a 12-year-old boy is only going to make it on his own for so long and may want to return home at some point. And the family is not going to be there when he does. So I think that's a little odd that they moved so quickly, because Jaliek disappeared at the end of 2007, and they moved the following year in 2008. So they didn't stay there very long while the investigation was going on. The main person, I should say, that is still fighting for Jaliek is Jocelyn's mother. So it is Jaliek's grandmother is still fighting for Jaliek daily. She had come forward and said that she had witnessed some violence against Jaliek by Stephen in the past. So when Jaliek was having these outbursts, Stephen was getting a little bit rough and a little bit violent with Jaliek. She also had stated that prior to Jaliek even coming to live with the family, Stephen had had a lot of anger management issues that had caused problems with his relationship with Jocelyn. They had split up and gotten back together several times because of the anger management issues that Stephen had. He was supposedly taking anger management classes, but whether or not that worked or whether or not it was even true, I don't know. This was just what the grandmother had reported, and she continues to work with police to try to find out what happened to Jaliek. So now, 2021, the family still lives in Vermont. No charges have ever been filed against anyone, and Jaliek is obviously never been found. Stephen remains the only person of interest that the police have ever had in this case. They do believe that foul play was part of this. They do not believe that Jaliek just ran away, and some trace of him would have been found by now had he run away. He was 12 years old with emotional issues and developmental delays and things like that. He would not have been able to make it that long on his own. So they do believe that foul play did play a part here. The case is still active, however. It's not necessarily a cold case. There just hasn't been any new evidence recently that has helped them figure out what happened to Jaliek. So I will link the Greenwich Police Department's phone number in the description box, and I'm also going to link some sources where I got some information where you can find additional photos of Jaliek. They even have some age progression photos of what they think he may look like now or as he got older, because keep in mind he was only 12 years old when he disappeared. Now, one of the theories at the time of Jaliek's disappearance was that he may have went to go live with two of his half-siblings that lived in the city of Albany, which I would say, I didn't look it up, but I would say that it's probably about a 25-minute drive from where Jaliek was living in Greenwich. But that was pretty quickly ruled out. They had never heard from him as far as trying to see each other or come live with them or anything like that. So that was ruled out by police pretty quickly. Today, Jaliek would be 26 years old. At the time of his disappearance, he was 5'6" and 105 pounds. And like I mentioned before, I will leave the phone number for the Greenwich Police Department in the description box below, just in case anybody has any information at all. But that is it for me today. Thank you guys so much for stopping by for the very first cold case and coloring video, and I hope to see you again next week. Bye, guys.